I woke up to the sound of metal scratching against my front door, the kind of high-pitched squeal that makes your stomach flip before your brain has time to catch up. For a second, I thought it was a raccoon clawing at the wood, but then I heard the unmistakable jingle of keys, several of them, being tested one by one. That was the moment I realized someone was trying to unlock my door from the outside. Not just jiggle the handle, not knock, not ring the bell, actually unlock it. My son was home. 13 years old, just tall enough to raid the fridge like a bandit, and definitely not ready to stare down an intruder. I was halfway down the stairs before I even remembered to grab the baseball bat leaning against the wall. Then I heard her voice. Nasally, authoritative, and dripping with that fake patience you hear from people who think the world exists to accommodate them. It's the master key, don't worry, it always works. The HOA gave me permission. Just open up. I froze halfway down the steps, suddenly more furious than afraid. There was only one person in this neighborhood who had the gall to claim she had a master key to my house, Karen. HOA board member, self-declared guardian of neighborhood order, and the kind of woman who believed every fence height, mailbox color, and dog bark was her personal business. She had already filed complaints about the color of our shutters, about the angle of my driveway, and once about my son's basketball hoop for being unsightly. But this was new. I listened, heart pounding, as my son's voice floated from the living room, shaky but firm. My dad's home. You should probably leave." Karen didn't leave. She laughed, this short, dismissive chuckle that made me grip the bat tighter. "Sweetie, I'm just checking the lock. HOA safety inspection. Nothing to worry about." That was it. I swung the door open so fast she almost fell forward into my foyer. And there she was, caught red-handed with a ridiculous bundle of jingling keys, her floral blouse tucked into pants that screamed manager of nothing, her face frozen halfway between guilt and outrage. "Care to explain," I said, voice flat, "why you're trying to break into my house with a ring of stolen keys while lying to my son?" She straightened up, smoothed her blouse like she was about to give a speech, and narrowed her eyes at me. "This is an HOA matter. As a board member, I have the authority to ensure compliance and safety. Your locks look outdated. I was simply testing access." "Testing access," I repeated, staring at her with disbelief. "You mean breaking in?" "Don't be dramatic," she snapped, finally noticing the bat in my hand. "And put that thing down, you're scaring me and the boy." My son leaned against the couch, wide-eyed but smirking now that he saw I had things handled. The absurdity of the moment hit me like a punchline. Here was a grown woman, in broad daylight, trying to gaslight her way into my living room with a bag of keys like she was auditioning for a heist movie. I leaned against the doorframe, lowering the bat just enough to look casual. "Karen, let me be clear. If you try this again, you won't be talking to me, you'll be talking to the cops. And I'll make sure to let them know you told a minor you had a master key to his home." For the first time, her confidence cracked. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes darted toward the street where her SUV idled like a getaway car. She muttered something about me being uncooperative and setting a bad precedent, before she stormed off, heels clacking against my porch like angry punctuation marks. I shut the door, locked it, ironically, the very thing she'd been trying to bypass, and looked at my son. His hands were still shaking, but he grinned. "Dad, did she seriously say she had a master key?" "Yep," I said, exhaling. "And that's exactly why this is going to get interesting. Because I knew Karen. She never stopped at one failed attempt. When she wanted control, she escalated. And this little stunt? This was only the beginning. When I said Karen never stopped at one failed attempt, I wasn't exaggerating. The woman had an Olympic-level ability to escalate nonsense into full-blown drama. After the break-in stunt with her so-called master key, I knew she'd either retreat and lick her wounds, or come back louder, bolder, and twice as entitled. Given her track record, I bet on the latter. Sure enough, The next morning, I woke up to the sound of muffled voices outside my window. Pulling back the curtain, I found Karen standing on my lawn with two other HOA board members, gesturing animatedly at my house like she was leading a tour of a crime scene. One of them had a clipboard. The other, a phone angled suspiciously toward my windows. I went outside, coffee mug in hand, and leaned casually against the porch rail. "Morning," I called out. "Enjoying the view?" Karen's head snapped around, her expression lighting up with faux surprise. "Oh, you're awake. Good. We were just conducting a compliance inspection. Nothing to worry about." The man with the clipboard nodded like a bobblehead. "We've had concerns raised about your property. Possible violations." "Violations?" I raised an eyebrow. Is not letting Karen break in with a stolen key a violation now? Karen's cheeks flushed crimson, but she recovered quickly, plastering on that patronizing smile of hers. "We're trying to ensure the neighborhood remains safe and up to code. Some residents feel your locks aren't secure enough. It's a liability issue." My son, who had followed me out with a piece of toast hanging from his mouth, nearly choked laughing. "You mean because you couldn't open them?" Karen shot him a look that could have curdled milk. "Young man, this is serious business. Children shouldn't interrupt adults. Neither should adults trespass in children's living rooms," I said flatly, and I could see the clipboard guy hesitate. He scribbled something down but kept his eyes low, like he was already regretting being there. Then Karen made her first big move. "If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to issue fines. The HOA has authority over all homes in this community. Safety and uniformity are non-negotiable." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence hang just long enough to make her twitch. "Karen, you can write down whatever fantasy violations you want. But here's the problem. You don't have jurisdiction over my locks. Or my house. Not unless you plan to explain to the police why you were jiggling keys outside my door like a wannabe locksmith." The other board member with the phone coughed, muttered something about having to go, and walked off toward his car. Clipboard guy lingered another moment, then followed. Suddenly it was just me, my son, and Karen standing in the awkward quiet of a standoff she wasn't winning. She lowered her voice, leaning closer. "You think you're clever, don't you? But everyone here knows you don't fit. You've been defiant since the day you moved in. And let me remind you, HOAs can make life very, very difficult for people who don't cooperate." I smiled, calm as ever. "Karen, the difference between us is that I don't need to make life difficult for anyone. It just happens naturally when you overstep. Like yesterday." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she spun on her heel, storming back toward her SUV with the same angry punctuation from before. My son grinned. "Dad, she looked like she was about to explode." "Oh, she will," I muttered, finishing my coffee. "Count on it." And explode she did, later that afternoon, in front of half the neighborhood. I came home from work to find a bright orange notice taped to my front door. In bold letters it read, "No compliance. Property violation. Immediate action required." Below that was a list of absurd charges: unapproved basketball hoop, improper window tinting, potential lock hazard. Each fine was listed at $250. At the bottom, it said failure to pay may result in legal action. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the porch steps. My son came running out, took one look at the paper, and started cackling. "A lock hazard? That's not even a thing." I snapped a picture and sent it to my lawyer buddy, who texted back within minutes. "Yeah, no. Total bluff. They're overreaching. Document everything." So that's what I did. I photographed every notice, every smug little note Karen left on my mailbox, every time she parked her SUV across my driveway like it was her personal throne. The next twist came 2 days later. Karen showed up with a locksmith. At first, I thought she was just being dramatic, but then I saw the man actually setting up tools at my front door. I stormed outside. "What do you think you're doing?" The locksmith, clearly uncomfortable, gestured toward Karen. This lady said I was authorized by the HOA to replace your lock. Safety update, she called it. Karen folded her arms, chin tilted skyward. It's for the good of the community. Your current locks are outdated and non-standard. We're upgrading them. I stood between the locksmith and the door. No, you're not. And if you so much as touch that lock again, I'll call the police and let them know Karen here hired you to perform unauthorized entry. The poor locksmith's eyes widened. Wait, you mean you didn't approve this? Of course he didn't approve it, I snapped. Now pack up before you end up in a lawsuit you don't want. The man backed off immediately, mumbling apologies as he tossed his tools into his truck. Karen was left standing there, furious and sputtering. You're obstructing community progress. I cut her off with a smile. Karen, what you're doing has another name. It's called attempted burglary. And you just tried it in front of witnesses. That was the moment her face cracked into something almost panicked. She muttered something about miscommunication and hurried off, leaving me with the strongest sense that the game had only just started. That night, after my son was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. If Karen wanted war, she'd get it, but not on her terms. I wasn't going to yell or slam doors or get dragged into the mud. No, I'd play the long game. Quiet, steady, and smarter than her tantrums. Because if Karen thought she could intimidate me with keys, fines, and locksmiths, she had no idea what was coming next. And I'll admit, part of me was starting to enjoy this. If Karen's locksmith stunt had been her second act, then I should have known the third would be even more dramatic. The thing about people like her is they don't recognize losing. They just reframe it, twist it, spin it into something that makes them the victim while they gear up for their next offensive. And I could see the gears already turning in her head the moment she muttered miscommunication and retreated down my driveway. The following week was unnervingly quiet. No orange violation notices. No HOA stooges with clipboards. No Karen pacing my lawn like a guard dog. My son even joked over breakfast. Maybe she finally realized she's insane. I just smirked. No, she's planning something. Silence is just her way of building suspense. And sure enough, the suspense broke on Saturday morning. I was mowing the lawn, earbuds in, when I noticed a cluster of neighbors gathering by Karen's SUV across the street. She stood in the center like a general marshalling her troops, waving around papers and pointing, always pointing, at my house. I turned off the mower and strolled over, casual as you please. Neighborhood pep rally? I asked. Karen spun, her face lighting up with false sweetness. Oh, perfect timing. We were just discussing the petition. Petition? I echoed, folding my arms. She thrust a clipboard at me, pages covered in signatures. We, the undersigned members of this community, demand immediate compliance from your household. Your refusal to abide by HOA safety standards is jeopardizing everyone. If you don't act, we will escalate to legal enforcement. I scanned the list. Most names were familiar, people who either owed Karen favors or were too timid to defy her. A couple signatures even looked suspiciously identical. Let me guess, I said dryly. You told them I'm hoarding explosives or running a meth lab to get this many signatures? Her jaw tightened. Don't be ridiculous. I simply explained that your outdated locks are a danger to the entire community. Criminals could exploit them. I tilted my head. Criminals like the one who tried to open them last week? That earned me a chorus of awkward coughs from the group. One man shuffled his feet. Another mumbled, "Well," Karen said, and trailed off. I handed the clipboard back without signing. Good luck with your petition. I'll be sure to file it with the police as evidence of harassment. Karen's smile flickered, but she recovered quickly, raising her voice so everyone could hear. See? He admits he won't cooperate. This is exactly why we need stronger enforcement. I walked away before she could continue her performance, but inside I knew she wasn't bluffing. The petition wasn't about convincing me, It was about building her army. Karen thrived on numbers, on the illusion of authority. And she was about to try wielding it. That night, as if to confirm my suspicions, I got a letter delivered by certified mail. Inside was a formal notice of legal action, on HOA letterhead, claiming I owed $2,500 in fines and threatening to place a lien on my home if I didn't comply. My son read it over my shoulder. "Can she actually do that?" "Not legally," I said, filing it neatly into my growing evidence folder. "But she's betting I'll panic. That's her whole strategy." The problem for Karen was that I didn't panic. I planned. And while she was rallying her little fan club, I was quietly laying the groundwork. The next day, I called the county housing office. After a half-hour on hold, I finally reached a clerk who confirmed what I already suspected. Our HOA didn't actually have authority to dictate lock standards, nor could they unilaterally levy fines without a court order. Better yet, she gave me the number of a state regulator who handled HOA misconduct complaint. I took notes, filed forms, and copied everything. But I wasn't going to reveal that card just yet. Timing mattered. Let Karen dig her own hole a little deeper. By Tuesday, she had organized a full-blown emergency HOA meeting in the community center. Flyers were taped to mailboxes and shoved under doors, each one announcing, "Safety crisis, mandatory attendance." I almost laughed at the audacity. My son begged me to bring popcorn. Instead, I brought my notebook, a pen, and the calmest expression I could muster. The meeting was a spectacle. Karen stood at the front with a projector displaying grainy photos of my house, cropped at weird angles to make it look sinister. She clicked through slides like a prosecutor in court. "This," she declared, pointing at my front door, "is a weak point. An open invitation to criminals. And this basketball hoop, unapproved, unsafe, unsightly." People murmured. Some nodded, others looked skeptical. A few just looked bored. When she opened the floor, I raised my hand. "Mind if I respond?" Karen's eyes glittered. "Of course. Transparency is important." I stood, notebook in hand. "First of all, Karen, the only person who's ever tried to break into my house is you. Second, according to county housing regulations, Section 12, Paragraph 3, you don't actually have the authority to mandate lock replacement. Third, issuing fines without due process is not only unenforceable, it's harassment. Which, by the way, I've documented extensively." The room went quiet. Someone coughed. A woman in the back whispered, "Is that true?" Karen's face flushed red, but she rallied. "He's twisting facts. The HOA exists to protect us. If he refuses to comply, we'll pursue legal remedies." I flipped a page in my notebook. "Already ahead of you. County regulators have copies of your notices, your petition, and this lovely letter threatening a lien. If you'd like to explain to them how you tried to hire a locksmith to force your way into my home, be my guest." That landed like a grenade. Gasps, murmurs, side eyes. Karen's composure cracked for just a moment before she forced a laugh. "Exaggerations. Misunderstandings. He's just trying to avoid accountability." But the seed was planted. People started shifting in their seats, whispering to each other. Karen banged the gavel dramatically and ended the meeting early, her smile brittle as glass. On the walk home, my son nudged me. "Dad, you wrecked her PowerPoint." I chuckled. All I did was tell the truth. The rest takes care of itself. But I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her never quit when cornered, they lash out. The petition, the fake fines, the meeting, all of it was just her ramping up the pressure. Which meant the next move would be desperate. And desperate Karen was the most dangerous kind. That night, as I double-checked the locks, I couldn't shake the feeling that her so-called master key stunt had only been the opening act. She still believed she had power here, and she was about to prove just how far she'd go to keep it. The question was, how far could she push before she crossed a line even she couldn't talk her way out of? I used to think the loudest sound in suburbia was a leaf blower at 6 in the morning. That was before Karen decided to weaponize chaos. The morning after her crumbling HOA meeting, I woke to a pounding at my front door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a full-on battering ram rhythm. My son appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, and I motioned for him to stay put while I opened the door. On the porch stood 2 uniformed police officers, and behind them, predictably, Karen. She was smiling like a cat who had just dropped a half-dead mouse on the welcome mat. "Sir," one of the officers began, "we received a call about a possible break-in occurring at this address." I blinked. At my own house? While I'm standing inside it. Karen leaned forward, voice dripping with concern. "I saw suspicious activity last night. Lights flickering, shadows moving. I thought someone had forced entry. For the safety of the neighborhood, I had no choice but to report it." The taller officer studied me carefully. "Mind if we take a quick look inside?" I could have refused. I knew my rights, but I also knew Karen was banking on me making a scene she could twist into belligerent homeowner hides something. Instead, I stepped aside. "Be my guest. Just don't trip over the expensive basketball hoop she hates." My son stifled a laugh from the stairs. The officers gave the place a quick sweep, found nothing but dishes in the sink and a half-finished science project on the dining table, and came back looking mildly embarrassed. "Everything checks out," the shorter officer said. "Sorry to bother you." Karen's smile faltered. But the shadows." "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, "false reports waste our time. Don't do it again." I almost applauded. Instead, I closed the door behind them and turned to my son. "See? This is what desperation looks like. She's running out of tricks." But I was wrong. Karen wasn't running out of tricks, she was just upgrading them. The very next day, a bright yellow truck pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a city code enforcement officer with a clipboard. Behind him, Karen lurked like a stage manager, directing the scene. "Afternoon," the officer said, adjusting his sunglasses. "We received an anonymous complaint about unpermitted renovations at this address, supposedly involving reinforced doors." I stared at him. "Reinforced doors? My house has the same doors it had when I bought it." He shrugged apologetically. "We're required to investigate." I let him in, showed him the perfectly ordinary locks and doors, and even pulled out the manual that came with them. He made a few notes, then gave me a look that clearly said, "Sorry, this is ridiculous. No violations here. Have a good day." Karen, of course, was waiting outside. "You didn't check the basement," she barked. The officer sighed. "Ma'am, he doesn't even have a basement. If looks could kill, I'd have been vaporized by the glare she shot me as the truck drove off." My son, watching from the window, grinned. "She's actually going insane, isn't she?" "Insane," I agreed, "but still dangerous. Cornered animals lash out." And lash out she did. 2 nights later, I was jolted awake by the sound of my son screaming. I bolted from bed, heart pounding, and found him in the living room pointing at the front door. The lock rattled. The knob shook violently. I grabbed the bat. "Stay back." The door gave a sharp click as a key slid into the lock. My blood went cold. Whoever was out there wasn't just testing this time, they were coming in. I yanked the door open mid-turn, and there she was. Karen, keys in hand, eyes wide like a deer in headlights. "What the hell are you doing?" I barked. She lifted her chin, voice trembling but defiant. "The HOA authorized me to perform a safety inspection. You've left me no choice but to take matters into my own hands." Behind me, my son shouted, "Dad, call the cops." Karen's bravado faltered for a second. "You wouldn't dare. That would make this a scandal for the whole neighborhood." "Exactly," I said coldly, phone already in my hand. "And guess whose name will be in the police report as the trespasser with a bag of stolen keys?" For once, she looked scared. Not furious, not smug, actually scared. She muttered something about miscommunication, again, and backed away, disappearing into the night. But this time, I didn't let it slide. I called the non-emergency line and filed the report. The officer who came out, a younger guy who'd clearly dealt with her before, nodded as I explained. We've had calls about her before. We'll make sure this goes on record. My son was still shaking when the officer left. Dad, what if she tries again when you're not here? That hit me hard. All my sarcasm and long-game patience cracked for a moment. Because beneath the absurdity, the petitions, the fines, the fake violations was a simple truth. Karen had scared my kid in his own home. I knelt beside him. Listen. She doesn't get to win. Not here. Not with us. I promise you that. And that's when I decided the long game wasn't enough anymore. It was time to end this. The next morning, I called my lawyer friend again. We drafted a cease and desist letter outlining every stunt Karen had pulled. Fake fines, locksmith, false police report, attempted unlawful entry. We sent it certified mail to both Karen and the HOA board. Then I filed an official complaint with the state regulator, attaching every photo, letter, and police case number I'd collected. Karen thought she was playing a game of intimidation. She had no idea she'd just handed me the evidence to dismantle her entire little kingdom. But as satisfying as that thought was, I knew Karen wouldn't go down quietly. People like her never did. The question wasn't whether she'd retaliate, it was how. And sure enough, her next move would be her boldest yet. When you've spent weeks locked in battle with a woman who believes the world rotates on the axis of her HOA clipboard, you learn to read the silence between storms. After I filed the cease and desist and submitted the formal complaint to the state, Karen disappeared. No pounding on the door, no neon notices, no phony locksmith. My son even remarked at breakfast, "It's like she got abducted by aliens." I wasn't fooled. Karen didn't vanish, she regrouped. The calm was only the inhale before the scream. It came on a Thursday afternoon. I pulled into the driveway after work to find 3 SUVs parked haphazardly in front of my house, hazard lights blinking like a warning beacon. A crowd had gathered on my lawn. At the center of it stood Karen, bullhorn in hand, rallying like a general. "This house is a danger to our community," she bellowed, voice magnified for every passing car. "Unsafe, non-compliant, a threat to children and families. We demand accountability." Beside her, a few loyal followers waved signs. "Community safety now. Enforce the rules. Evict non-compliance." I killed the engine, stepped out slowly, and just stood there, watching the circus unfold. My son peeked out from the window, wide-eyed. I gave him a small nod, it was fine. I had been waiting for this. Karen spotted me and pointed like a prosecutor. "There he is. The man endangering us all. He refuses to cooperate, refuses to obey. And yet he hides behind legal loopholes while we suffer." I walked calmly through the crowd until I was standing just a few feet from her. "Karen, you've really outdone yourself this time. You've turned my lawn into a bad reality show. What's next, a dunk tank?" She sneered. "Mock me all you want. Today, the board has voted unanimously to escalate. We're filing for a lien on your property and beginning removal proceedings. You will not poison this neighborhood any longer." The crowd murmured, impressed by her confidence. For a moment it looked like she'd won. Then I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and held it up. "Funny thing," I said. "While you've been playing dictator with a bullhorn, I've been talking to people who actually matter. Regulators, lawyers, police. This," I waved the envelope, "is a cease and desist order filed against you, personally, for harassment, trespassing, and misuse of authority. And this," I pulled out a second document, "is confirmation that the state is opening a formal investigation into this HOA's practices." Karen's smile cracked like glass under pressure. You're bluffing." I handed copies to a couple of neighbors standing closest. "Not a bluff. You can read for yourselves. Every fake fine, every forged signature, every midnight break-in attempt, it's all documented. And let me remind everyone here, The police already have a report of Karen trying to use stolen keys to enter my home. While my son was inside. That last part landed like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One woman lowered her sign. A man muttered, "Wait, is that true?" Karen turned desperate. "He's twisting everything. He's dangerous, he." But the spell was broken. The crowd wasn't chanting anymore. They were whispering, questioning, stepping back from her. Karen's army was dissolving in real time. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough that only she could hear. "You wanted a spectacle. You got one. The only problem is, now everyone sees you for what you are." Her face contorted between rage and panic. For the first time since this began, she had no script, no comeback. She dropped the bullhorn and stormed off toward her SUV. A few of her supporters scattered after her, but most just lingered awkwardly, avoiding my gaze. I turned to the crowd. "Look, I didn't move here to fight with anyone. I just want to live in peace with my son. If you have real concerns, I'm happy to talk like adult. But what's been happening isn't about safety or compliance, it's about control. And I don't think any of us signed up for that." The tension bled out of the gathering. Neighbors exchanged uneasy looks. A few even nodded. Someone clapped lightly. Then, as quickly as it had started, the crowd dispersed. My lawn emptied. My driveway cleared. Inside, my son practically tackled me in a hug. "Dad, you destroyed her." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "No, son. She destroyed herself. I just let her do it in public." But the saga wasn't over yet. The regulators moved fast once they saw the pile of evidence. Within weeks, investigators showed up at HOA meetings, demanding record. Rumors swirled about missing funds, improper votes, and creative bookkeeping. Karen's name was always at the center. Eventually, the board held a special election. Karen was voted out loudly, overwhelmingly. She didn't even show up to hear the result. By then, her SUV was gone from the neighborhood, her house dark, blinds drawn. The last I heard, she sold the place and moved in with her sister 2 towns over. No goodbye parties. No farewell speeches. Just silence, the kind she couldn't spin. Life returned to normal. My son shot hoops in the driveway without orange notices taped to the pole. I mowed the lawn without an audience. The locks on my doors remained exactly the same, a quiet reminder that sometimes the simplest defense is just not budging when someone tries to push. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the trees, my son asked, "Do you think she'll ever come back?" I sipped my coffee and shook my head. People like Karen don't come back. They just find a new neighborhood to torment. He grinned. "Poor neighborhood." I chuckled. "Yeah. But at least we'll always have the story of the HOA Karen who thought she had a master key." And with that, the chapter closed. Not just for me, but for everyone on this block who finally realized that authority isn't the same as power, and that sometimes the best way to fight entitlement is to shine a very bright light on it until it shrivels. For the first time since moving in, my house felt like home.